we shouldn't aspire to look like anybody. We should aspire to be fit and healthy. If you stop strength training, you will lose your muscle. People will always comment on women's bodies with the health implications of my obesity. This conversation right now is just bonkers to me. Hi everyone, my name is Mima. I used to be obese. I lost all the weight through a combination of GLP-1 medication, a whole foods diet, and weightlifting, and now I am training to be an endurance cyclist. So today's video is going to be something very different from the videos that I've made and uploaded so far. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys my 2 cents, my thoughts, my perspective on a conversation that the Global Cycling Network channel here on YouTube had on one of their recent videos, and that is about weight in cycling. Whenever you click one of my videos, I always say who I am, and that is an obese person who lost the weight and is now training to be an endurance cyclist. So as you can imagine, I have a lot to say about this topic. I know the topic about weight can be a fairly sensitive one, so I just want to make it clear that I am coming into this and reacting and adding my 2 cents into this conversation as someone who used to be obese and who's worked really, really hard to shed the weight, and also who is now living essentially the life of an athlete, so to speak. I train 6 days a week. I eat an 80-20 whole foods diet. I have a very regimented day, a routine. I sleep early, I wake up early, which is a complete 180 from the life that I used to have when I was obese. I am not saying that either life or either situation is worse or better than the other. I am just emphasizing the fact that I have been on both ends of the spectrum and lived 2 completely different lives, which is why I have a lot to say about this topic. I also have fresh eyes. As I said, I'm a beginner endurance cyclist. So this is like my 2nd month learning about the sport, learning about the people who excel in the sport, what they do, what their habits are, what their training is like, what their nutrition is like. So I am really learning a lot and learning about what the issues and conversations are in this world. It is very, very interesting to me and actually pushes me and entices me to learn more about the sport and be more educated about the science, the mechanics, the physics, the nutrition pieces, all of that good stuff. I also just want to say that I love the Global Cycling Network YouTube channel. It is probably the channel that I binged the most when I started on my endurance cycling training journey. So I very, very much appreciate that they're having these kinds of conversations and also to some degree educating me on where the cycling community is in terms of their opinions and their thoughts on these very, very sensitive issues. I have all of the love for GCN, and my reaction here is definitely not going to be anything against them, the channel, or the announcers that were in this video. It's just me adding my thoughts and my opinions into the discussion that they've had. Honestly, without GCN, I don't know where I'd be as a beginner baby endurance cyclist at the moment. It was their content that allowed me to actually know where to begin and to know which questions to ask and just how to start. But a quick note before we dive in, all of the clips used here are owned by the Global Cycling Network, and they are being used on their fair use for commentary, reaction, and educational purposes only. I don't own any of the original content. As I said, it's owned by the Global Cycling Network. I'm just adding my own thoughts to it and sharing how it connects to my own journey. So I'm going to scooch on over to this side so we have a little bit of space for you guys to see the actual clip that I am going to be reacting to, but otherwise, we're ready.
We learned that weight will always matter in professional cycling, just so long as gravity continues to exist and climbs, I suppose. Yeah. But it's perhaps not as much of a thing as you think.
So professional cycling has long been a sport, really, where skinny people seem to prevail. Not all of the time, but certainly most of it.
I mean, they just said it. It's science, right? That's, I think, one of the things that I noticed the most when I started getting into cycling was that a majority of the pro cycling athletes were just naturally very, very lean. And it's especially for the pro cyclists when you do the races that have so much elevation. it is very detrimental to your race and your performance if you are not as lean as possible. It's just gravity, essentially. So
even riders who look relatively big and muscular when they're on the bike don't really generally look that big off the bike, do they?
Filippo Ganna being a case in point, he looks massive compared to others in the men's peloton. But this picture of him off the bike shows just how skinny he still is.
That guy is actually 6'4". Like, I had to research it. I just needed to know like what height he was. And if you are 6'4" and cycling, you will look massive on your bike, because a lot of these bikes are also as lean as possible. They're like the lightest that they can possibly be for them to be able to be as fast as possible. So if you're 6'4" and you are in an aero position, which is kind of like this hunched back position in cycling, yes, you would look incredibly massive because you also have that wingspan. Probably not the Michael Phelps type of wingspan, but yes, you would look incredibly massive hunched over in your bike and just like cycling as fast as you can. So this guy, Filippo Ganna, is 6'4". So yes, he will look massive on a bike. But of course, when he's like unfurled from his aero position in a standing position, he will just look very tall and lean and not at all like this huge mass on a bike, basically. So
compared to, well, certainly the general population, but basically everyone.
It is.
And yeah, 6'4" is sort of like, I don't think that's an average height for a man. Like, I think that's like pretty tall, right? Like, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not average. And you would not look like an averagely built man if you're that tall. So
It's always surprising when you see them in real life, isn't it? Now, the dangers of continually striving to be as lean as possible have long been known and long been discussed, but recently the debate got quite heated when Pauline Ferrand-Prévot of Visma Lease bike won the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, having visibly lost a lot of weight since the earlier spring classics.
Yeah, it wasn't so.
now, this was actually the news article, or like her case, Ferrand-Prévot's case was the one that I saw a lot on my Instagram, and my Instagram is just starting to get cycling content because of what I like to consume now. But this was actually the one incident, or at least conversation, that got me to read more about weight in cycling as well.
It was heated. It was just very personal, wasn't it? A number of riders in the women's peloton spoke out to say that they felt that she'd set a dangerous precedent for current and aspiring pro cyclists.
And just to clarify, I don't think they mention it. This is not the first time I've seen this clearly, but I don't think they mentioned how much weight she lost. She lost about 4 kilos, or I think that's around 9 pounds. And I forgot to actually research what her height is, but she does look incredibly lean. That's a part of the reason why this conversation started. But she also won the Tour de France, so.
Now, you can understand why there was that sentiment, right? So the potential risks to a female of being underweight are more serious, both short and long term, than they are for males. And for either sex, they're pretty blooming serious, aren't they?
Yes. So I wanted to emphasize that too. Being underweight in women can be incredibly dangerous, and there's so much detrimental health impacts to being really underweight and super, super low in body fat. When you're a woman, like, you would have issues with your menstrual cycles, like hormonal issues, fertility challenges. You do get fertility challenges when you're morbidly obese and obese. That was my case. Like, that was a big part of why I wanted to lose the weight. But you also get a lot of fertility issues when you are underweight and low in body fat percentage. I mean, it affects your skin. You can get dry skin. Also, like, brittle and thinning hair, like, that's also an issue. Like, you can like see if you are underweight and undernourished, like, on a person, especially on a woman. And even more important, I think, is how much your bone density is impacted negatively by having lower body weight. That is just one of the very, very bad effects of having super low in body fat or being super, super underweight as a woman.
However, it did also feel very unfair towards Ferrand-Prévot at the time, didn't it? And even now. So there was a rider who, under strict supervision of team coaches and doctors, trained and prepared meticulously for her biggest goal of the season, arriving at the start in peak form and then riding away from everyone, all of her rivals, in the mountains.
And she was a monster. I am not super familiar with the Tour de France, but from the articles that I've read about her win is that she actually really broke away from the pack or from the peloton during the toughest climbs of the Tour de France. So she also talked about this in many of her post-victory interviews, was that she did this basically with an entire team behind her. So she had a nutritionist, there was of course a doctor as well. She had a chef. Basically all she needed to do was show up and train, and everything was prepared for her. So imagine if you had the entire team. So the food that you would be fed actually, one, probably already meets the macro goals that she needed to, one, probably lose the weight that she had a target to lose, and also the macros that she needed to keep up her strength, because you can't cycle monster elevations like that and win the freaking Tour de France without keeping up your power or improving your power. So I think like that's super important to keep in mind, is that she just wasn't losing the weight. She kept her power. She wasn't weak. She was incredibly strong. And in addition to that, to be able to keep being that strong while still losing the weight, you don't need just the macronutrients, but also the micronutrients. So all of the food that was prepared for her very highly likely met all of those goals or all of those requirements, the macronutrients, the calories, and the micronutrients. So she's not just, holding herself up in a room and not eating. This is very scientific, very monitored, and she's doing this while training. You can't lose weight and win the Tour de France without help and supervision and science and monitoring and all of that stuff. Like, it's just not possible, not in this day and age.
But rather than then getting to celebrate her massive win, she was then having to answer questions about her weight loss.
Yeah, now Florent Prevost is no different to many who've come before her, and unfortunately, many who will come after her. There's a good reason.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where women can't just get a break. People will always comment on women's bodies, right? Whether they are way too big or way too small, someone's always gonna say something. Even if you're a freaking Tour de France winner. Absolute bonkers to me that the conversation wasn't just about her monster ride of the elevations of the Tour de France. Like, it was also overshadowed by this conversation about her weight loss, which was, again, a controlled, monitored, doctor supervised, nutrition supervised, chef fed weight loss. Like, to me, a 500 feet elevation is a struggle. Like, this is peak form to me. And I can't believe that there's actually a conversation about her weight after this win.
Why there is a weight obsession in cycling, because if you can lose weight whilst maintaining the same power, then you are going to climb faster. Yeah. It's a fact.
Science. That's why a majority of the pro cyclists that you see are very lean. It's because they need to be as fast as possible, but also they also need to keep up the power. They can't ride these elevations without power. It's not as if these cyclists are not eating and nourishing themselves, because they will not be able to cycle those elevations without the proper nutrition and the proper strength.
And climbing faster is quite a key part to success, isn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly in the Grand Tours. That said, I would say that we are in a better place now than we used to be. I mean, there's such a wealth of knowledge out there.
Yes, I would agree with that as a baby endurance cyclist. Like, there's just so much research already out there. There's so much material. There are just so many more products that you can use to help aid you in your training. So I am really super appreciative of that. And one of the interesting things or bits that I got from some of the interviews that Florent Prevost gave after her victory, and the ones that were talking about her weight, actually, was that she was saying how a few years ago you could win the Tour de France as a woman without a team. Basically, you could win it on your own. You wouldn't need to have all of the staff behind you. But now, apparently, like, you can't do that anymore because of the technology in both like the bikes themselves and the food technology, the nutrition technology that is available for cyclists to be at their peak, at their prime, and be able to eat as efficiently as possible. That was just so interesting to me. And I am actually super glad that I am cycling right now in this day and age where there's so much more available to me.
So many ways to accurately measure performance and health that in theory, there should be a much lower risk of doing short or long-term harm by pushing things too far.
Yeah, either with weight loss or with training load.
Yeah.
So anecdotally, it also appears that professional cyclists are consuming more calories than ever before.
Oh my God. I can't imagine. Like, I can't believe if you just like go through the cycling related subreddits of people, you know, questions around nutrition and how much should you eat if you are going on X amount or X distance for a ride, like just the amount of food that people consume. It is absolutely bonkers to me. Also super grateful that the option is there, that we can eat as much as we want, essentially, which is pretty amazing. As someone who is coming from the other end of the spectrum, as an obese person who for until now has had to basically carefully track her macros and her food, her caloric intake, and her micronutrients as well. But just how much people eat and how much people cycle and eat at the same time, absolutely crazy to me. I still have not actually gone into the world of the gels and all of that stuff. I'm still like in the baby part of this where I'm experimenting with electrolytes and different kinds of solid foods like bananas and cookies and different kinds of like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I'm not at that efficient, ready to eat, fast eat gels and all of that stuff. So that's something that's probably going to come later on, but bonkers to me how much cyclists eat while they're riding and also after they ride.
Like just literally eating more. Although part of that is it's a necessity since they're also expending more calories per hour than ever before as well.
But as we said, all of that is planned and analysed in detail by the pro teams, all of whom want their riders to be in peak form.
That, again, I mentioned this, I think, a little bit earlier, is that you can't ride if you're weak. So if you're just losing weight for losing weight's sake as a pro cyclist, like you are not going to be able to survive the ride. I don't think Ferrand Prevot did this just to like lose the weight so she could lose that like 9 pounds. She did it to be at peak form and to be able to get to her goal. And again, there's an entire team behind them. There's an entire team that is tracking every single carb, every single component of the carb, whether what kind of sugar that is, like it's all meticulously monitored and supervised. So it's essentially to make sure that you as an athlete are in your primest, your peakest form. It's not just like weight loss.
And also peak health. A cyclist's salary.
Peak health. That's it too. You have to be healthy. I've said so many words, but I didn't say the one important word, which was you need to be healthy in order to have the opportunity to win something as big as the Tour de France.
Have increased massively in recent years, and the last thing that any team would want is zero return on their investment because a rider is sick or ill and can't race.
Yeah, quite a cynical outlook, but also probably quite true.
I like this point, and yes, it may be a little cynical because it is about sort of like an investment, your return of investment, like a monetary value. But these riders are sponsored and they are paid, they are salaried by companies and teams. And in order for them to finish at the podium, they need to be healthy. As a team owner or like whoever is managing that team, I don't think you would want an unhealthy rider just because you will not be able to finish podium if you are an unhealthy rider, or if you have a rider on your team that's unhealthy. Which is why to me this conversation about weight and pro cycling is kind of bonkers as someone coming from the other end of the spectrum and someone who is now sort of like in this space and training and eating and living her life like a sort of athlete. Like this conversation right now is just bonkers to me. So
I think, though, there is a wider topic here, isn't there? Okay, so pro athletes has, as you just said, incredible supervision. The problem is that normal people, everyone else, tend to hold up sports stars, their physicality, something to aspire to, and that therefore causes an issue, doesn't it?
But maybe there needs to be more of a distinction. I mean, elite sport is about pushing boundaries, isn't it? And the general population shouldn't be aspiring to emulate somebody who's pushing the limits of human performance under that strict supervision.
I had to think a little bit more about this portion of the discussion that they had, because I do like looking up to pro athletes or anyone who is at the peak of whatever they are doing, right? But in my case, or what I think we should be emulating from pro athletes specifically, not their physicalities, I think, because each sport will have their own physicality, right? And each person in the sport will have their own physicality. But I think what we should be emulating is their dedication, their discipline, their drive, their push to be able to be at the peak and at the top of their sport. I think that is what we should be emulating from pro athletes, and not their physicality. It's really how their minds worked, how they pushed themselves, and how much discipline they've built to be able to get to where they are. I think that is what should be emulated from pro athletes, and not the physicality. I mean, they've said it multiple times, and I've said it multiple times, is that a lot of these athletes have entire teams behind them. They're supervised, they're monitored, their food is made for them. And that's not something that an average person can do. We have lives, we have 9-to-5 jobs. I have a 9-to-5 job. We have children, pets, family members to take care of. An average person doesn't have an entire staff of people cleaning their homes and doing all of their errands, right? So it should be that the physicality aspect, of course, it is a very difficult part and a very arduous part of being a cyclist or any athlete in general, because that is the instrument of which you actually get to your goal. But behind that physicality is, of course, that drive, that dedication, that discipline, that mentality. I think that is what we should be emulating for, and that is what we should be striving in ourselves to build.
Might be hard to make that distinction, though, mightn't it?
Yeah, true. Yeah. I'd say undoubtedly it would be, actually, thinking about it. But we also can't, shall I say, ask professional sports people to sacrifice performance because they're deemed to be negatively influencing those that watch those performances. The fault doesn't lie with the athlete.
No, I get your point there. And
yeah, I think, like, especially for this conversation around emulating physicality of athletes, I think a lot of this has to do also with young athletes who look up to, like, these more established, celebrated pro athletes, and they really want to emulate and look up to them, and want to reach whatever heights, like, these pro athletes have reached, right? And I do feel like in order for our young athletes, our kid athletes, not to fall down into that very, very dark rabbit hole of wanting to be their idols, especially how their idols look and what kind of bodies their idols have, is to be a very present, very well-informed and educated parent for these kids and for these young athletes. You can't just, like, hand over your kid athlete to a trainer and say, all right, make them into an Olympic athlete or something like that, especially if you are a young cyclist, female or male, and you're looking up to Ferrand Prévot and you're saying, I want to be like her, I want to have her power. And you're only looking at her physicality and not actually all the variables of the equation that led her to her Tour de France win, it could really get you as a young athlete into a very, very dark path. So if you were a parent of that cyclist, I would definitely urge that parent to be as well informed and well researched, and also read up, know more about the sport that your kid is playing in, and be engaged with their trainers. Make sure that their trainers are also up to date with the science, the nutrition, the research around the sport, and also have conversations like this about the realities of what Ferrand Prévot had to do and the resources that she had to be able to do this, right? I think that is one piece of the puzzle to be able to mitigate these kinds of really, really dangerous mentalities in our young athletes. I think parents and trainers have a big responsibility to actually mitigate and manage these kinds of thinking around young athletes. So
I guess, well, when you look at cycling, there's probably a few other sports, aren't there, as well? Marathon running, maybe as well, where the most high-profile athletes can often look unhealthily skinny, don't they?
yeah, I mean, I'm not into marathon running. My first ever PE class in college that we had to take, I took running and I absolutely hated it. So it's really not my thing. When I started thinking about what kind of sport I wanted to get into when I lost all the weight and started really having a lot of gains in strength when really months into my weightlifting journey as well, running was definitely not on the table for that. But yes, running is very similar in the sense that the fastest ones are usually the leanest ones. It's also just science. It's sort of like the physics of all of this, the gravity in this equation. So that's why marathon runners are incredibly lean, because running is also a high impact sport. I mean, you are on your feet running for hours and hours and hours, especially if you're a marathon runner. And if you were on the bigger side, the amount of pressure that would have in your joints, I am not sure you'd be able to survive a marathon. Not at all surprising that this is sort of the physicality and the physique that many elite marathon runners have. So,
although one look around the peloton or the what's the peloton version for running?
Park run.
Park run. No, not park run. You know what I mean, though? There's loads and loads of different sizes and shapes of athletes who can end up winning, whether you are muscled or built like a pipe cleaner.
Like me.
Yes.
Maybe the point is that we shouldn't aspire to look like anybody. So,
Wow.
because
yeah, I mean, we shouldn't aspire to look like anybody. We should aspire to be fit and healthy, and whatever that looks like for us. I think that's what we should aspire to. So,
if we look at the other end of the spectrum, which would
be like sumo wrestling.
Yeah, like sumo wrestling. Is that a dangerous precedent to set? The sumo wrestlers, for example, a bit of a tangent here. I don't think anybody should be looking at the best sumo wrestlers in the world and trying to look the same. But I also don't think that sumo wrestlers should be asked to shed a few kilos if the extra weight genuinely helps them to be at the top of their sport.
Well, yeah.
Okay, when I first watched this was kind of like really funny to me in a very curious way. It's a funny example to use in a conversation around weight. And I know it might be obvious because sumo wrestlers are very big. They have to be very big to be able to win and overpower their opponents, whatever. But sorry, I'm just laughing. It's because to me, it's a really, really ridiculous example. It's mostly because of the fact that Japan has one of the lowest obesity rates in the world. I think they're probably around sub 5% as opposed to the US. And I've forgotten how much exactly. I think for the US, 70% of the US population is overweight. I'm not entirely sure how much of that is obese or morbidly obese, but Japan is leagues away with not having an obesity epidemic. And it is probably more likely that people in Japan would strive more or like to emulate more the physique or physicality of Ferran Prévot than sumo wrestlers, right? Sumo wrestling is a big part of their culture, but I think just generally on the average person would prefer to look like Ferran Prévot than a sumo wrestler. So that's why I thought it was a ridiculous and a really, really funny example, because it's just the reality, the everyday reality on the ground in Japan when it regards to obesity and health is just completely different. And health is a big part of the conversation here too, so.
I must admit, I hadn't envisaged talking about sumo wrestling when I set off to work this morning.
But you brought it up when I stumbled a minute ago.
I feel like I was prompted. To be fair, though, I feel like it's slightly different, isn't it, sumo wrestlers? Because I think fewer people look at them and think that they are...
Like to be like that.
Yeah,
We don't know because we're not in that culture.
Well, no.
Again, low obesity rate in Japan, it is more likely than not that people will prefer to have Ferran Prévot's physique in Japan than a sumo wrestler. So just judging by the numbers, I would say.
That is true. Yeah, maybe it is just... But do you know what I mean? There's something about being like visibly athletic, that is something that appeals to people.
I think what you would be correct in saying is
Yes, I think there is. And I think that it's just one, it may be also biological, right? Like we are attracted to just healthiness generally, and the physical or the visual representation of being healthy usually is fit people. But health is more than just physicality. But there's also something to be said about what I said earlier, the dedication, the discipline, the drive, the mentality of being an athlete, the body that comes with being an athlete. Like that is very, very attractive to many people, very, very attractive to me. So I completely understand that.
that we don't know enough about sumo wrestling to really pass comment or judgment at this point, so we should probably get back onto the topic where we do know a little bit about it, shouldn't we?
Yeah, okay.
The other thing that we should bear in mind is that humans' natural weight, it varies massively from person to person, doesn't it? Personally, I've always been skinny.
Yeah.
Up until now, at least. And my whole family is skinny as well. It's not that any of us are consciously restricting calories. And in some ways, we're very fortunate in that way. We can kind of eat what we want without fear of piling on the pounds. And I think it's worth keeping that in mind if you're ever scrutinising an athlete's weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just you just use up so much calories as a cyclist. Like even me, that I am still on a GLP-1 medication for my insulin resistance, how much I get hungry after I cycle. Of course, I get hungrier and hungrier the longer that I ride, but it's just insane to me how much I could definitely eat after a ride, especially for these guys. And I know these two guys used to be pro cyclists too, is they just, they eat in response to how much their body has expended the calories from riding and training and all that stuff. And I feel like also more often than not that a lot of the cyclists who become pro cyclists are fundamentally on the skinny side. So yeah, it's not surprising to me. It's just a huge number of cyclists are skinny and have been skinny their entire lives. That ain't me. Like I said, I used to be obese, but I totally see where that is, especially in the world of pro cycling.
It is a good job that you like cycling, isn't it? Because, bear in mind how upset you got when you tried for a year to put on loads of muscle, and then you managed a couple of kilos, and then you lost half of it after three bike rides.
From cycling, yeah.
Yeah.
This is such a funny conversation. I actually like this conversation because it just shows you the reality of a cyclist's obsession with the sport. I love cycling. Like, I have only been in this for about 2 months now, and I wish I could ride every day. I want to ride every day. But I know that I still have strength goals, and I am also lifting weights for my longevity, the longevity of my life, for aging, and I cannot ever stop strength training. If I want to live a long, happy, mobile life, I cannot stop strength training, not even to replace cycling with that. And that's why I do strength training three times a week and cycling 3 times a week. But if you stop strength training, you will lose your muscle. You will probably keep the muscles in your quads if you keep cycling and, riding in trails and routes with a lot of elevation and stuff like that. But you will lose the muscles in the other parts of your body. So you either decide to, there's a lot of options that you can do. You can decide to just stop strength training and just cycle forever. But if you want to keep muscle, you have to be able to do both. You have to stop that compulsion to only cycle. I would love to only cycle for the rest of my life. It is usually one of the happiest times of my days. It's just the amount of joy it gives me right now, which is why I keep coming back, is just immense. I look forward to Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday mornings every time. And tomorrow is going to be a Saturday, so I am doing a 40K challenge, and I'm terrified but also super excited. So if you want to keep your muscles, you have to continue strength training, even if you want to cycle so bad. You just have to. You just have to. There's no way to be able to keep muscle without continuing strength training. So.
But it is a really good point, actually. Like, I'm making light of it, but the Scottish runner Eilish McColgan, she talked very publicly about it recently. She has been criticised horrendously on social media for being too skinny and accused of having, to the point where she then felt like she had to explain to people that she is healthy. She just, same as you, she's just got a very slender frame.
Yeah, size and shape is as much a part of natural talent, really, as his ability to develop.
Yeah, if you are also an active athlete, like active meaning like you are still working as an athlete, like you are training all the time, you're probably not going to be a different body weight than if your goals as an athlete change. But especially it really depends on your sport as well. Maybe a huge part of it is also just the misogyny of it all, the incessant need for society to comment on women's bodies, no matter if they are an Olympic athlete or just a random person off the street. Like,
you know, monster, what's it, FTP, isn't it? Or a Tour de France winning sprint. Just like you can overtrain when trying to get fitter, so too you can mess yourself up if you try to lose too much weight.
Yeah. So I never had any issues with eating or with my weight when I was like racing full time, but I did spend my whole career wishing that I looked leaner. Like, and it genuinely used to make me unhappy at times. And then as soon as I retired, I stopped caring about it as much.
Even I still talk about your ankles all the time.
this is kind of like the sad thing about this too, right? Is that even if you're a pro athlete at the peak of your sport, or even like just at the peak of your physicality, sometimes it's just never enough, which is the sad part. I honestly would not know, because I have never been a competitive athlete. Clearly, again, I was obese, overweight my entire adult life. I was obese. I just lost all the weight. So the moment you stop your career as a pro athlete, your goals just change, your things just change, your life changes, and your body also changes. So
yeah, talk about or just take the piss out of my ankles.
Well, we probably shouldn't do in sort of context of this subject, really, should I?
I'm
in all
right
seriousness, well, yeah, I'm all right with being called skinny as well, although I have put 4 kilos of muscle on. Just starting to get that back on now.
Oh, are you?
No, not really.
Didn't that guy stop you in the middle of the your Manchester to London ride and say that he thought that you would have looked bigger?
Yeah, he was exasperated at how skinny I looked. I thought you'd look way bigger, having been down the gym so much. Anyway, what's also worth bearing in mind in all of this is that weight actually doesn't matter as much as you might think. Of course, being overweight does have health implications, and you're likely to feel better if you're able to shift a bit of that. But when
that is an incredibly important point that I would like to emphasize as well. And that is the reason why I lost the weight, was the health implications of my obesity. I mentioned it in my introduction video, but I was very likely to have gestational diabetes. My husband and I are, in the process of preparing to expand our family. So we have been doing for the past couple of years now all of these like health stuff and making sure that we're healthy mentally and physically. But yeah, the gestational diabetes piece was one of the things that I was really, really scared about. I was very likely to have issues with actually conceiving and would likely have a difficult pregnancy and very challenging birth. And I was also already pre-diabetic, insulin resistant. I also have high cholesterol, which is more genetic, but also I feel like my diet back then contributed a lot to that as well. So the health issues part was definitely why I decided to lose the weight and really turn my life around and did an entire 180 of my lifestyle. So just wanted to emphasize that. And I'm really grateful that they brought it up, because, this conversation about weight seems to be on the other side of the spectrum, right? It's about how lean can you go, or how lean is too lean. But we are forgetting the fact that on the opposite end of the spectrum too is that there are serious health complications as well with being overweight and obese. Well, not even overweight, but obese for sure.
we're talking about getting underweight, really there are very few gains to be made from shifting a couple of extra kilos.
Yeah, ironically, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot would still have won the Tour de France without that weight loss, wouldn't she? When you look at the maths. I mean, what did you find when you put it in the calculator this morning? 10 kilometre climb at 10%.
Yeah.
1 kilo body weight difference was what, 16 seconds or something?
No, at 10% it was 22 seconds, but that was on a 65 kilo rider. But I was expecting it to be a lot more than 22 seconds over a 10 kilometre 10.
So I think pretty insane, given that Ferrand-Prévot won with such a decisive margin between her and the second place finisher. And you might even asked the question of like, did she even need to lose that weight? She felt that she needed to lose the weight in order to be at the peak of her performance, in order to be at peak power. That to me is the only opinion that matters. And it was a supervised, monitored, well-supported, you know, weight loss. So that to me is the only thing that matters.
% climb at 65 kilos if you lost a kilo. It's not as much as you'd think, is it?
No, it really isn't as much as you'd think, yeah. So yeah, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot was just so much stronger than everyone else.
That's it. That's just it. Whether or not she lost the weight, she was just so much stronger than everyone else, and her losing the weight just made the win just as decisive as it could be. And the fact that she was just so much stronger than everyone else meant that she lost the weight the right way and the healthy way. So,
but you can say that her margin of victory was greater than it otherwise would have been, having lost that little bit of weight.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Almost undoubtedly. Right, time to hand it over to you guys at home. What do you think about this whole issue? Was it overblown, or should it be talked about more?
I sort of feel like cycling's actually in a really good place.
I think it is as well.
At the minute, I think there are so many of the top riders, men and women, who just look so much stronger than they used to because they're doing stuff off the bike, they're going to the gym, because they're eating more. Like, they're still obviously super lean, super, you know, fit, but I just think it's better. And then we've got...
I agree with this. Like, the cyclists that I see on my rides are just super fit. Like, not thin, not very like incredibly lean, but they're just incredibly fit, and it's very, very nice to see, especially those that you're seeing resting at the rest stops and then just like eating massive amounts of sugar. If you go through like the subreddits, the cycling related subreddits, a lot of them swear by full sugar Coca-Cola, which you would never see me. Like, it's just not a thing that I would ever do again in my entire life. But a lot of people swear by that kind of sugar and other very, very sugary treats. So cycling, I think, is in a fairly good sport when it comes to this. And again, just so much more resources out there, whether it's for your bike or for your nutrition. There's just so much out there.
More role models for bigger riders like Abrahamson.
And every member of the public, professional, amateur, or whatever, has way more information at their disposal to learn and to eat the right things and do the right things than we had as pros 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, way, way more.
I do wonder whether it's just a lot of it is just, it's just crap on social media.
It's just society in general wanting to comment on people's bodies and wanting to overshadow a huge achievement that a woman reached. Like, I feel like that's a huge part of that too. Because we don't hear this discussion in the men's part of the Tour de France, right? There are so many lean men there, and so many of the male cyclists who also lose weight to be able to be more aero and climb faster in the elevations. So I don't know.
In it, like a minority of people making comments that then makes it seem like it's a bigger thing than it really is.
Quite possibly.
Anyway, that's where you come in now, right? Because you can tell us whether this is actually a thing.
All right, so I guess we should end it there. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this first of its ever kind of video like this. If you like this kind of video, let me know. I would like to create more of these kinds of videos, but if I do that, it's going to be incredibly specific and not just like reacting to random videos here and there. So something like this, right? Like the conversations around weight and cycling, I think, which I said was something that I have thought about a lot as well. I would like to hear your thoughts too. If you have ever thought of this, or if you are an athlete or an avid sporter, I don't know, any kind of sport that you do as a part of your lifestyle, let me know what you think and how you feel about the weight conversation, because I would love to hear your thoughts and your own experiences as well. And we'll just end this here. I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, happy riding.